New York, New York. The Bronx is up and the battery's down. Everybody rides in a hole in the ground. Oh, good morning. This is Dave TV for the 27th of April, 2012. Hi. Well, I am a New York native. I was born in New York City back in Lenox Hill Hospital up there on the Upper East Side. My mom was a nurse at the time, and my dad was in the Army, and they lived on Staten Island, and she wanted to have me at a good hospital. So it was a snowy February, and they drove up to, took the Staten Island ferry over, and then, I don't know, they got up to, took the subway or something up to Lenox Hill, had me, and then it was a big snowstorm, and then I went and stayed in my mom and I, dad stayed up in my grandparents' house up in Westchester County for a couple of weeks while my dad was back in the Army because my mom didn't want to be down in Staten Island with me, the new little baby, all alone down there. And then Dad got transferred out to Fort Lewis in Washington State, and then Mom and I flew out there, and the rest is history. But anyhow, talking about New York, I digress. Talking about New York, New York news. Okay, today, this week, Washington radio news isn't so hot, kind of slow. So let's go look at some New York radio news, and we got some interesting New York radio news. That's right. So, what the heck? Yes, New York has basically 3 urban radio stations, okay? They got 97.1 Hot 97, WQHT, which is probably their main urban station. Then they've got 98.7 Kiss FM, which is also another urban station. And then they've got more urban adult, if you want to call it that. And they've got, a WBLS, which is 107.5. And the problem is urban stations under these new PPM ratings, the ratings are hurting them. They're hurting a lot of music stations. They're hurting a lot of rock stations. They're hurting a lot of urban formatted stations. And the reason, it just seems like, whatever the methodology of the PPM meters are, it's just a lot of stations where people tune in and listen to rock and urban and other kind of more long-formy type music formats. It's hurting those stations, and they're seeing their ad revenue declining. And so they're flipping format. And, as we've reported on DCRTV for quite a while now, a lot of rock stations across the country have lost their formats, flipped their formats, including 105.9 The Edge here in Washington back in September, became a FM relay for the news talker WMAL. But up in New York, so you got a station, a long-time urban station, Kiss FM and 98.7. Well, there's been a big deal done. MS owns this company. MS owns the station. And Emerson just did a deal with ESPN to lease out the station for a decade so that they can get an FM sports talk station in New York. Now, New York does not have an FM sports talk station. And now they're going to have one on 98.7 come Monday, believe it or not, as soon as that. So that means one of New York's urban stations is going away. So what's going to happen to KISS? Of course, no relation to our KISS here in Washington, 93.9. Anyhow. Right now, the ESPN sports station in New York is on 1050 AM, okay, which doesn't have such a great signal, especially at night. So that'll be moving over to a much better signal, 98.7. Meanwhile, eventually, sometime over the summer, they will flip 1050 into an ESPN Deporte format, and they will become a Spanish sportser, okay? So ESPN is a win-win deal there. They're going to be getting an FM outlet for their English language sports station, and they're going to be eventually flipping 1050 over to Spanish sports, which is a good move because New York has a huge Spanish-speaking population. And then, so what's going to happen to Kiss FM? What's going to be merging, basically, with WBLS. WBLS is a very long time, again, another long-time adult urban outlet there in New York City. This was owned by Inner City. Inner City is going bankrupt, filed for bankruptcy protection. So this is getting transferred to a new company, and then Emmis is selling the intellectual property rights of KISS over to this new company. Okay, so this signal is already now starting to call itself KISS, and they're going to have a merged format. Some of the people from BLS will be staying along, some of the people from KISS will be staying along, and then the rest of them are saying adios amigos. So basically that takes New York City down to basically 2 major urban stations, okay, 97.1 and 107.5. Yeah. So there. What else is the other implication from that? The other big implication now, it's like one shoe is dropped, okay? We now have this whole thing going on with KISS and the new FM ESPN sports talker on 98.7. Okay, what's going to happen now? The next shoe must drop, and it's going to be a big one. CBS. CBS owns two all-newsers and one big sports talker in New York City, but they're all on AM. They own WFAN 660, which is a sports talker, one of the top sports talkers in the country. They also own WCBS 880, which is a news talk with the Yankees, I believe, and they own 1010 Wins, which is also a news talker. The problem is that a lot of with FM sports talk now popping up in New York, CBS can't just let its sports talk stay on grunky old AM. So the question is now, which one of the lower rated format stations in New York, music format stations, is 92.3, the old WXRK, which used to have Howard Stern on it many moons ago. It's now contemporary hits. Okay, the rumors now is that CBS is going to take either 660 the Fan or 880 WCBS and move it over to FM 92.3. So that's the next shoe that's going to drop. Eventually, I predict, yes, maybe not this week or next week, but eventually they're going to do this. You know, CBS just took, they killed off a rock station in Philadelphia, WISP, and put their AM sports talker WIP 610 on the FM frequency of 94.1. So I think they're going to do I wouldn't be surprised if they do the same thing in New York to compete with this new 98.7 signal. So I would be, I'll make a prediction. I'll go way out on the limb and make the prediction that CBS will take WFAN and put it on 92.3 in New York soon. It's just interesting to see how quickly a lot of these music formats are dying. I mean, I think in a couple of years, basically the FM band will just be news and talk, local news and talk of one form or another, or sports talk. And most people will be getting their music either on internet feeds or on iPods or from their own private collections or whatever. There will be a few music stations remaining, sure, but, you're not going to be tuning up and down that FM dial and hearing mainly music stations. It's going to be mainly talk stations, and I think that's how the whole thing's going. The problem is now today with all these internet music streams and with music formats are becoming so nichified, and that's what's killing off rock radio. Back in the day, you could put a basic rock format on a station, and a lot of people would listen. Now everybody wants their little niche rock format. I want old classic new wave, and I want thrash metal, and I want folk rock, and I want this. Rock genre has broken up into 10, 12, 15 different niches. And you can witness that by going on Sirius. When you flip down Sirius, there's like a dozen rock stations on Sirius, all with little niche formats. And people have gotten used to that, and they like that. And, they don't want to listen to these broad kind of formats like what 105.9 The Edge had here in Washington for classic rock. Which was a broad classic rock format that, barely never made it over 20th place in the ratings. So we shall see about that. Interesting news here in Washington with all this, the Wizards and the doing well, and the Caps into the playoffs, and the Nationals doing well, and it's like, hey, will that hold over and raise some of the sports talk ratings in Washington? Washington has two major sports talkers, WTEM, ESPN 980, and 106.7 The Fan, WJFK, and neither of them gets particularly great ratings. They're 18th, 19th place, 17th place in the ratings, So it'll be interesting to see, especially with WJFK, because they'll have the Capitals playoffs on there, whether that will give that station a little bit of a lift. So we shall see. All right, folks, that's my Dave TV for today. A little bit of a New York state of mind. New York, New York. My grandfather, as I said, lived up in New York, just north of New York in Westchester County for most of his life. And he retired near Atlantic City. And I used to go up, as a kid and visit him a lot with my family. And Grandpa and I, we drive around a lot and check out the beaches and stuff. And Granddad always had his car on 880 AM. Even down in Atlantic City, he was always listening to WCBS. That was his station. News Talk, WCBS AM. He was always listening to that station, and it was amazing because it had a great signal. And even down in Atlantic City, you could get it day and night. Great. He was always, cranked up. He always get his New York Times delivered, even if it had to be delivered by mail. Back then they didn't have daily delivery of the New York Times in Atlantic City, so we'd always get his New York Times come the next day in the mail. So, it would be Thursday, and here would be Wednesday's New York Times. He didn't mind. All right, folks, that's Dave TV for today, Friday, the 27th of April. Have a great weekend. So, there.